Life has no meaning. That claim often kicks off an existential crisis. There's no instruction manual, no cosmic purpose, no built-in reason for your being. At first, that sounds bleak. No pre-assigned role, no destiny waiting to be discovered. Nature doesn't hand out meanings, it just continues. Unlike a chair made to be sat on or a phone made to communicate, humans weren't manufactured for a specific function. We simply exist, and that realization can feel disorienting. Many of us grow up on stories that everything happens for a reason, so discovering there may be no universal purpose can feel like falling. But no inherent meaning doesn't have to mean emptiness. It can mean openness. If life wasn't designed to mean anything, then meaning becomes something we create. Picture an empty field. One person sees loss, another sees a blank canvas. The absence of a built-in purpose doesn't erase possibility. It hands the responsibility of meaning to us. That freedom is liberating for some and intolerable for others. Building a life of meaning requires effort, choices, and sometimes grappling with uncertainty. It doesn't imply the world is hostile to purpose, only that purpose isn't pre-selected by the cosmos. If life is to matter, we must make it matter ourselves, not because the universe demands it, but because we decide it's worth doing. No one truly knows what's coming next. That's not an opinion. It's the reality of life. The future is, by nature, uncertain. Plans help, routines help, but they never guarantee outcomes. You might expect things to unfold a certain way, and sometimes they do. Other times, life turns sharply when you least expect it. Uncertainty shows up in both small and big ways. Missing a train, losing a job, meeting someone new. Every moment holds variables you can't fully predict. This doesn't mean you should be pessimistic. It simply means uncertainty is built into the structure of life. You can prepare, anticipate, and hope, but complete control is never possible. That applies to everything: your health, your career, your relationships, even how you'll feel a week from now. Think about a normal day. You wake up, go to work, come home. It looks predictable, yet a single phone call, a delay, or a flat tire can shift its entire direction. Stretch that across months and years, and you see the bigger picture. Plans fall apart, opportunities appear out of nowhere, and sometimes despite your best efforts, outcomes change because of factors far beyond your reach. The hardest part is how the human brain resists uncertainty. It craves patterns, answers, stability. When life feels unpredictable, stress rises. Not always because something bad has happened, but because something might happen, and the mind doesn't know how to hold that possibility. And yet, uncertainty is not only difficulty, it's also possibility. If the future were fixed, nothing could change. Growth wouldn't happen. New chances wouldn't appear. Surprises wouldn't exist. The very fact that things can go wrong also means they can go right. Uncertainty is the space where hope lives. Still, it influences the way people make choices. Some freeze, clinging to what feels safe. Others take risks, trying to shape outcomes even when success isn't guaranteed. Neither path is completely right or wrong, because there's no way to be certain how anything will end. In the end, uncertainty isn't a puzzle to solve. It's a condition to live with. Every step you take, every decision you make happens with only a partial view of what lies ahead. You never see the full map, only the piece under your feet. And time keeps moving forward, whether you're ready for it or not. At some point, often in childhood, we discover that people don't live forever. That first encounter with death stays with us, even if we rarely speak of it. It's the moment when someone who was once present, a grandparent, a pet, a neighbor, is suddenly gone and not coming back. The idea is simple to describe but hard to absorb. Permanence gives way to finality. For children, death is often softened with phrases like "they've gone to sleep" or "they're in a better place." But eventually the truth arrives. Death is irreversible. Someone you could laugh with, hug, or talk to is now beyond reach. The door has closed, and no one can say with certainty what lies beyond it. What makes this experience so profound isn't only the loss. It's the shift in perspective. Before death, life can feel limitless. Days stretch long. People feel unshakable, and the concept of forever gone doesn't exist. Afterward, everything feels more fragile. the world takes on a new layer of impermanence. Sometimes this awareness builds slowly, an aging pet, a sick relative. Other times, it arrives abruptly, through an accident, a sudden phone call. Either way, the impact is the same. Life has boundaries, and no one is exempt. This first brush with death also deepens our emotions. Sadness transforms from fleeting disappointments into something heavier: grief, absence, silence. Even if it isn't spoken about, people begin to carry it quietly, and it shapes how they see time, relationships, and meaning. It also shifts what feels real. The world may seem less steady. Some respond with fear, others with curiosity, and some with renewed appreciation. But nearly everyone emerges with heightened awareness of what's at stake. The first experience of death isn't just about losing someone. It's about realizing that nothing, not even life itself, is guaranteed. That truth stays. You may grow, plan, and move forward, but a part of you now knows. Everything is temporary, and some things can't be undone. It's one of the earliest moments where reality sharpens, and its imprint lingers long after. Most people believe that the joys of life can balance out the suffering, that happiness can outweigh hardship. But a challenging philosophical view argues the opposite, that pain will always overshadow pleasure. This isn't about pessimism. It's about noticing how deeply pain shapes our experience compared to joy. Pain, whether physical or emotional, leaves stronger marks. We remember hurt longer, react to it more intensely, and spend more energy trying to avoid discomfort than pursuing happiness. A headache, a cut, or even a cruel remark can take over our attention, while moments of pleasure, a good meal, a compliment, a laugh, fade quickly. One harsh word can linger despite dozens of kind ones. A single setback can ruin a day that was otherwise good. Pleasure feels fleeting, pain feels heavy and lasting. There's an evolutionary reason for this. Our brains are wired to prioritize pain because it signals danger and keeps us alive. Pleasure, though rewarding, doesn't protect us in the same way. That tilt makes suffering harder to escape. Illness, loss, fear, and disappointment are inevitable for everyone. But joy often requires effort. Nurturing relationships, planning moments of rest, creating meaning. Pain arrives uninvited. Some philosophers push the argument further. If you tallied every moment of joy and every moment of suffering in a lifetime, pain would come out ahead. Even those who seem happy still carry anxiety, regret, or frustration beneath the surface. Life, in this view, isn't a steady state of happiness with occasional interruptions of sadness. It's the opposite. Pain is the baseline, and joy is the exception, brief flashes that punctuate the weight of existence. Whether or not you agree, the idea reframes human life, not as an easy journey occasionally disrupted by hardship, but as a constant struggle to tip the balance against a system designed, by evolution, by biology, to lean towards suffering. Everyone is living their own complex life. In a single day, you might pass by hundreds of people without giving them much thought. A glance, a nod, a polite smile, and then they're gone. But behind each of those brief encounters is a full, ongoing life, just as layered and intricate as your own. It's something we know but rarely pause to consider. Every person you see is the main character of their own story. They wake up with routines, plans, frustrations, and dreams. They carry old arguments, hopes for the future, and unspoken thoughts, the same way you do. Yet most of the time, all we see is the surface. A delivery driver, someone scrolling at the bus stop, a coworker walking past. We catch only fragments, a look, an action, and our minds fill in the rest. This isn't selfishness. It's simply how the brain simplifies the world so we can move through it. But in doing so, we forget how much remains unseen. Think of a stranger at the grocery store. To you, they're just standing by the cereal aisle. But maybe they're rushing before visiting someone in the hospital. Maybe they're newly divorced and still adjusting to shopping for one instead of two. Or maybe their choice of cereal connects to a quiet memory, something their father used to buy. None of that is visible, yet it exists. And it's not only strangers. Even those closest to us have inner worlds we'll never fully access, struggles they don't share, memories that never come up, habits shaped by stories we don't know. This hidden complexity doesn't mean chaos. It simply means people are layered in ways we can't always see. It explains the sudden temper, the quiet withdrawal, the reactions that feel puzzling. Often, those come from places that remain private, not because they're being secretive, but because most of life unfolds internally. The point isn't to analyze or guess what everyone is going through. It's just to remember, what you see is only a fraction of the whole. No one is just the guy at the bus stop or the coworker from the office. Everyone is carrying their own story, whether or not they ever tell it. The world isn't made of faceless crowds. It's made of individuals, each one living a life as vivid and real as yours. Your own existence probably feels like the most natural thing in the world. You think, you feel, you make choices, it all seems normal. But there's a curious idea in philosophy and science that flips this assumption. What if consciousness isn't a feature at all, but a glitch? The reasoning goes like this. Life evolved through countless trials and errors. Over millions of years, organisms became better at sensing and reacting to their surroundings. Vision, movement, memory, all useful tools for survival. Eventually, certain animals, including humans, developed brains advanced enough not only to react, but to predict their environment. That's when something unexpected happened. These brains didn't just model the outside world, they started modeling themselves. And with that came consciousness, the strange awareness of being you. But here's where the mistake part comes in. Consciousness is costly and, in many ways, unnecessary. You don't need it to breathe, to move, or even to survive. Most life on Earth manages perfectly well without it. Even humans often operate unconsciously, walking, speaking, or driving while barely aware. Yet consciousness adds layers of complexity we might not need. It brings self-doubt, anxiety, overthinking, and emotional pain that lingers long after the actual danger is gone. An animal feels pain only when it happens. A conscious mind, on the other hand, can suffer in anticipation and again in memory. From this perspective, consciousness wasn't some grand evolutionary goal. It was a side effect. The brain became so skilled at simulating reality that it accidentally started simulating itself. Like a computer powerful enough to analyze its own hardware, not because it makes the machine faster, but simply because it can. Self-awareness is, in essence, a running commentary of your own experience. Sometimes it helps, with planning, reflection, or creativity. But it also fuels confusion and existential dread. You begin to ask impossible questions about purpose, mortality, and identity, not because reality changed, but because your brain gave you the capacity to notice what other animals never need to. This doesn't mean consciousness is purely harmful. It has given rise to art, empathy, science, and imagination. But the argument is that none of this was inevitable. Consciousness wasn't evolution's grand design. It was a byproduct, an accident. And now we're the ones living with both the gifts and the burdens of that mistake. You are your own story. Everyone carries a version of themselves in their mind. It's not just who you are, it's who you believe you are. In a sense, you are the story you tell yourself. Not a fixed personality, not a consistent identity across time, but an ongoing narrative that explains your life, your choices, and your place in the world. This story shapes how you see yourself and how you act, even if it doesn't always line up with reality. It begins with memory. Since the brain can't store every detail, it highlights certain events, connects them, and weaves them into a storyline. Maybe you see yourself as resilient because you've overcome struggles, or unlucky because setbacks seem constant. Either way, that pattern becomes your story. Over time, it feels like your very identity. But here's the thing, the story isn't fixed. It's built from selective memories, filtered emotions, and hindsight. The brain edits details to keep the plot consistent. You might remember failures that reinforce the belief you're bad at relationships, while ignoring the moments that prove otherwise. You simplify timelines, exaggerate turning points, and draw conclusions that feel true, even when they're not. This inner narrative acts like a guide. It tells you who you are, what to expect, what you're capable of, and what you should avoid. If you believe you're the shy one, you might avoid speaking up, not because you can't, but because it doesn't fit the role you've written for yourself. In this way, the story doesn't just describe you, it shapes you. That's also why major life events, like a breakup, job loss, or big success, can shake us so deeply. They don't just change circumstances, they disrupt the story. If your script says, "I always bounce back," a sudden failure isn't just painful, it threatens your sense of self. This is also how transformation happens. People sometimes change dramatically, not because a new person suddenly appears, but because the story shifts. When someone releases old beliefs about themselves, their choices, habits, and reactions naturally evolve. It's important to note the story isn't entirely false. It's just one version of reality, limited, filtered, and incomplete. From the outside, others might see a very different version of you, based on their own perspective and observations. So when we say, "You are the story you tell yourself," it doesn't mean you're fake. It means identity isn't a fixed thing, it's a process. A constantly updated explanation of who you are, one that's far more flexible than it often feels. Reality is a controlled hallucination. Everything you see, hear, and feel is a construction your brain makes. That sounds strange, but neuroscience supports the idea. What you experience isn't the world directly. It's a simulation your brain creates from incoming sensory data, past experience, and internal models. In short, you don't perceive reality as it is. You perceive the brain's best prediction of it. Your eyes don't deliver a raw movie. They send patterns of light that the brain interprets and fills in to produce recognizable objects, faces, walls, trees, and the same holds for sound, touch, taste, and even your sense of time. The brain predicts to save time and energy, constantly running a fast internal model and updating it with sensory input. That's why you can pick out a familiar voice on a noisy line or move around your house in the dark without thinking. Because perception is prediction, it's efficient but imperfect. Optical illusions expose the shortcuts the brain takes. Distorted memories and convincing dreams show how the internal model can feel real even when it's wrong. Two people in the same room can experience it differently depending on attention, mood, and history. This doesn't deny an external world. It just means your experience of it is a simplified, personally tuned rendition. Failures of the model make the point plainly. Phantom limb pain, sensation from a missing limb, or motion sickness, conflict between inner ear signals and vision, arise from mismatches inside the brain's simulation, not from the world itself. Thinking of reality this way isn't saying we live inside a computer. It's saying our conscious world is always a real-time construction, shaped, edited, and personalized by a system we didn't build, quietly running the show behind everything we call real. When you feel bad for someone, it might not be about them at all. The unsettling idea that sympathy is just self-pity challenges our usual view of compassion. We normally think of sympathy as noble, caring for someone in pain, showing concern, offering support. But this perspective flips it. It suggests that much of what we call sympathy may actually be a reaction to our own discomfort. Here's the core point. When you see someone suffering, you may believe you're sharing their burden. But often, what you're really feeling is your own unease, helplessness, guilt, or fear triggered by witnessing their pain. The emotional focus shifts inward, even if you don't realize it. That's why sympathy can sometimes sound more like a reflex to soothe yourself than an attempt to understand the other person. Instead of asking what they need, people often rush to offer quick reassurance, over-identify with the situation, or shift the conversation toward their own perspective. Take this example. Someone loses their job, and you say, "That's awful. I feel so bad for you." On the surface, it's kind. But beneath it, your words may be more about your own anxiety over job loss, your discomfort with silence, or your need to appear caring. In that sense, sympathy starts to blur with self-pity. This doesn't mean sympathy is fake or worthless. It points to a psychological pattern, projection. We imagine how we would feel in the same situation, then respond to that imagined pain, not necessarily to the other person's reality. There's also a subtle power imbalance. Sympathy can cast the other person as weaker or in need of saving, while making the sympathizer feel morally superior or emotionally generous. If the main goal becomes easing your own tension, sympathy turns into a self-serving act rather than true connection. Empathy, by contrast, shifts the focus outward. It doesn't rush to fix or console. Instead, It tries to enter the other person's perspective without dragging in your own story. It's quieter, more about listening than reacting. So when people say sympathy is just self-pity, it isn't meant to dismiss kindness altogether. It's a challenge to look honestly at where our reactions come from. If the comfort we offer is more about calming ourselves than helping others, then we're not really supporting them. We're just echoing our own fear of suffering, disguised as concern. The mind wasn't built for happiness. Your mind wasn't designed to make you happy. Many people believe happiness is the brain's natural state, but that's not true. The brain didn't evolve to give you peace or joy. It evolved to keep you alive. When you realize this, a lot of everyday struggles start to make sense. Anxiety, overthinking, constant comparisons, self-doubt, even boredom. These aren't flaws in the system. They are the system. From an evolutionary standpoint, the brain's main job was survival, scanning for threats, avoiding danger, and reacting quickly. That meant focusing more on what could go wrong than what was going well. The humans who were carefree didn't always survive. The ones who worried, analyzed, and stayed alert were the ones who lived long enough to pass on their genes. That same wiring still drives us today. But instead of predators or food shortages, it reacts to emails, deadlines, awkward conversations, and social media. The brain still treats uncertainty as a threat, so it clings to worry, runs worst-case scenarios, and focuses on what's missing instead of what's present. From an evolutionary perspective, that's not a bug, it's a feature. Even happiness itself is temporary by design. A good event gives you a brief hit of satisfaction, but the feeling fades quickly. Soon you're chasing the next thing. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. You keep striving and surviving, but rarely feel fully content. Biologically, your brain prioritizes survival-related goals, reproduction, social status, conserving energy. Pleasure is just a short-term reward to push you toward behaviors that pass on genes. Long-term satisfaction isn't useful for survival. If you felt completely content, you'd stop striving, and your ancestors wouldn't have lasted. On top of that, the brain takes shortcuts that often backfire. Cognitive biases like the negativity bias, noticing threats more than positives, and comparison bias, measuring yourself against others, once helped humans survive, but in today's world, they fuel dissatisfaction. This doesn't mean happiness is impossible. It just isn't automatic. It requires effort. You have to work against the brain's defaults, slowing down, noticing thought spirals, and intentionally focusing on what's going well. It won't always be easy, because your brain resists what feels inefficient. But here's the key. If happiness often feels fleeting, unstable, or hard to hold on to, it's not your fault. Your mind was never built for permanent happiness. It was built for survival. And in that job, it's been almost too effective. Ego death is one of the most disorienting states a person can experience. It doesn't just challenge your sense of self, it strips it away entirely. In daily life, we carry a constant inner sense of me, a name, a personality, a history. We move through the world assuming there's someone behind our thoughts, someone watching, choosing, existing. Ego death is what happens when that illusion suddenly collapses. It's not physical death. It's the complete breakdown of the mental model you use to define yourself. The inner voice that narrates your day disappears. The sense of being separate from the world dissolves. What remains is something radically unfamiliar, awareness without a center. This state can arise in many ways. Psychedelic experiences are the most recognized, but it can also emerge during deep meditation, extreme emotional distress, or sudden spiritual insight. What matters isn't the trigger, but the revelation. When the self falls away, it becomes clear that identity is nothing more than a pattern of thoughts held together by habit. People often describe a loss of boundaries, no longer a clear division between subject and object, self and world. Experience still unfolds, sounds, sensations, colors, but without the feeling that it's happening to anyone. There's no observer, just reality flowing on its own. To some, this feels terrifying. The ego resists erasure. Yet for others, it brings profound clarity. The recognition that the self isn't fixed but a process, a story we repeat to stabilize ourselves, even though it was never solid. Afterward, many report a lasting shift. They return to ordinary life, but with a lighter hold on identity, less defensiveness, less obsession with image or control, and more openness to simply being. Whether ego death reflects a deeper truth about consciousness or just a temporary neurological state is still debated. But either way, it confronts us with a radical possibility that who we think we are may not be real, or at least not as real as it seems. In this sense, ego death isn't just a psychological event. It is a mirror, showing us that the person we imagine ourselves to be is not permanent, not essential, and perhaps not even necessary at all. Think about the past several hours. You've had thoughts, conversations, maybe moments of distraction, but through it all, something has remained constant: awareness. That quiet sense of simply being here. Now imagine that awareness never stops. Not during sleep, not after death, not ever. This is the idea of continuous consciousness, the possibility that awareness isn't just something you have, but something you are. And if that's true, what happens if it never switches off? Normally, we think of consciousness as coming and going. You fall asleep, awareness fades. You wake up, it returns. These gaps feel natural, as if they break time into understandable pieces. But what if the awareness underneath doesn't actually vanish? What if it only shifts? Some theories suggest that consciousness isn't entirely dependent on a waking, living brain. Instead, it might be an unbroken stream flowing through different states. You may not remember all of it, but the basic presence, the raw awareness, never halts. This leads into a more speculative idea called quantum immortality. It argues that since consciousness can't witness its own non-existence, it never encounters it. In every version of reality, awareness persists. There is no final off, only ongoing transitions. While most science ties awareness to brain activity, and the brain does shut down, there's a catch. No one has ever directly experienced total non-awareness. By definition, you can't be conscious of being unconscious. That makes it impossible to truly grasp whether awareness ever ends. This perspective reshapes how we view sleep, anesthesia, and even death. If awareness continues beneath them, then what we call nothingness may never actually be felt. The lights don't go out, they just change color. Even if unprovable, the idea is powerful. It flips the common belief that awareness is fleeting, suggesting instead that it may be the only true constant. Thoughts, memories, and even your body may fade, but the capacity to experience, the bare fact of being aware, could persist endlessly. It's a thought that leaves more questions than answers, but it lingers. If awareness never truly ends, then reality itself may never stop unfolding. The one thing we cannot deny is that something exists. You may doubt what's real or whether your memories are accurate, but you cannot deny that something is happening. And that is precisely what makes this question so strange. Why does anything exist at all? Most of the time, our attention is on what exists: people, objects, space, time. But this question goes deeper. It isn't about what exists, but about existence itself, the fact that there is something rather than absolute nothingness. This isn't just abstract wordplay. It is one of the oldest and most profound puzzles in philosophy. Not what caused the universe, not how matter works, but the sheer fact that reality exists in the first place. Try to imagine nothing. Not empty space, not darkness, not a vacuum, just the absence of everything. No time, no place, no observer. That is what people mean by absolute nothingness. But that's not our reality. We have something. We have existence. The question is, why? Normally, we explain things by pointing to causes. A tree exists because a seed was planted. The seed exists because of a parent tree. But when it comes to everything as a whole, the chain of causes collapses. You can't point to something outside existence to explain it, because that too would require existence. We end up in a loop. Existence explains only itself, without ever revealing why it's there in the first place. Some theories suggest physics might hold the key. Perhaps quantum laws make existence inevitable. But that only raises another question. Why do those laws exist? And why do they have the power to produce anything at all? Others argue that existence needs no explanation, that it is a brute fact, something that simply is. But that answer often feels unsatisfying. It bypasses the very mystery we're trying to confront, the existence of existence itself. This puzzle also reshapes how we think about meaning. If existence was necessary, If it had to be, that suggests inevitability. But if it was not necessary, then it could easily have been nothing, which makes its presence feel fragile, strange, or even accidental. Science often seeks answers by breaking things down into smaller parts. But existence has no smaller part to analyze. There is only the undeniable fact that something is, even though nothing required it to be. Perhaps the existence of existence is the most fundamental mystery we will ever face. It isn't about galaxies or particles. It is about the deeper question, why is there anything at all to wonder about? And so far, we still do not know the answer.